Okay, then. Good morning, everyone. We'll welcome you all to this webinar initiative seeking collaborative research opportunities between Brazil and Hungary. Without further ado, I welcome Professor Raul, Dean of Universidade Federal de Viçosa, to start his lecture. Lectures will be in Portuguese and English, and the slides will be in English. Okay? Thank you, Professor Raul, for your participation. Thank you.
Thanks, Edgar. Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. We had an initial contact with our colleagues in Hungary, and now we'll be able to profit from a few presentations from them and also from the consulate representative. So I'm just sorry that we'll not be able to make this presentially as thought initially. But hopefully by early next year, we'll be able to come to terms with that and receive you all with us in Viçosa and eventually pay a visit to our colleagues in Hungary as well. I'll be presenting quickly a general view of our university, and I'll be doing that in English. But of course, any questions, don't hesitate and let me know, and I'll try to reply them in either English or Portuguese as best as possible. And the intent here is really provide general informations of what we are doing in the university structure and some of its priorities. So without any further delay, in order even to allow to profit more from our colleagues, let's get started. Our university, at least regarding Brazilian terms, it's not one of the oldest ones, but still it's not young either. We started in 1926 as a basic agricultural university, so was a higher education institute focusing basically on agriculture and veterinary. And it was established in the molds of the land-grant universities in the US. We did have a huge expansion that started in the 70s and is still ongoing. And today we are rather comprehensive, although we started with the agricultural emphasis early on. As I mentioned, the university was established following the land grant system in the US, and it was actually established recruiting a previous dean from the University of Florida, Professor Peter Henry Holtz, which came over and established Viçosa initially as a state or rural university. And from that on, the university was expanded to other areas. And while that was taking place, Viçosa started to differ from other higher education institutions in Brazil, in which the European influence was much stronger. In our case, this U.S. presence was rather prominent, and it stayed that way until the 80s. Just afterwards, the university is spread out a bit more and started receiving or having stronger influences from especially Europe, but even Canada and Australia. This stronger US influence reduced over time. Although, regarding structure and methods of organization, we'll see similarities mainly with the US institutions. And one of the achievements early on in our university was the establishment of the modern day graduate degrees that we have in Brazil. And the first two ones was in rural economics and vegetable crops. And it was established with close collaboration with Purdue University, which started via the USAID initiative. So the initial two defenses, they took place in 1961 Today, the university, its main campus is in Viçosa, so it's relatively easy connection with the main airports. But from main airports to Viçosa, there is some roads to face, and the distance will vary greatly from where you are in. But the main train routes to reach Viçosa are from the state capital, Belo, and alternatively, Rio would be the best bet as a secondary source. But there are possible connections with another cities as well. And our university has the main campus in Viçosa, but expanded in the last few years with 2 additional camping cover different regions of the state. So we have Florestal near the state capital, a region more of stronger mining and agriculture, and the main agricultural area in the state, which is in the Rio Paranaíba region. So we are well represented regarding different landscapes and types of agriculture and lifestyle that we'll have represented within the state. Viçosa, it's not a particular large city. It's 80,000 inhabitants. It's mild climate. It's subtropical and quite hilly. You might have noticed here is just a few shots of the city, but provides a general view of what it looks like the main campus. An aerial view and the general numbers of the university, as I said, is not a particularly large university. It's less than 20,000 students, including graduating undergraduate students. Graduate students is roughly around 3,500 students. So with an inflow roughly approaching 1,000 students per year. We do have 50 academic programs, MS and PhD. We do have a dozen professional master's programs, besides of some specializations. And the university, regarding its structure, is split into 4 schools or centers, which are the agricultural science, which is the oldest one, biological science, including medicine and nursing, and physical, math, and technological science, and humanities, both well represented at the undergraduate level and also at the graduate level. Regarding a few rankings, usually the Brazilian ranks set the university in between the top 5 regarding graduate studies and top 10 regarding undergraduate studies. And the international ranks are here. Usually the university does better in the agricultural and forest science, exactly reflecting its history. And it's prominent not only within Brazil, but within the region as well. And these rankings are consistent since they are follow more or less the same positions, regardless of the ranking agency or institute. The university does have, of course, undergraduate and graduate schools, but we do have a strong emphasis on research and innovation as well. And our unit is more deeply involved in research and innovation are our research institutes, besides of our postgraduate programs. The 3 main institutes that we have nowadays are the oldest one, the biotechnology applied to agriculture. After that, you do have the public policy and developmental sustainability, which is more focused towards humanities, usually linked with agricultural science and biological science mainly. And the newest one, it's actually Unity from the Brazilian Innovation Initiative, and it's our Embrapa Unity of Forest Fibers. These are 3 well established and they've been running quite all right. We do have 2 newer initiatives. One is the Agribusiness and Bioeconomics Institute, which was established a couple of years ago and is still undergoing structuring. And we do have a bid for another Embrapa unity on biopharmaceuticals. And that is a third initiative dealing with artificial intelligence applied to agricultural science, agricultural and forest science. Regarding the unit is more deeply involved with innovation, bridging research and innovation. We do have, besides of the research structure, an innovation nuclei that follows up with the intellectual property and general guidance to university faculty and staff regarding them. And the Regional Center of Technological Development of Viçosa Centevi with its technological park. So those are the three main structures. The innovation nuclei or innovation hub, it connects with our graduate school and the School of Research and Graduate Studies. So we tend to work together, all these agencies. Regarding degrees, we have a nice set of undergraduate majors, all within the major areas of knowledge and split into those 4 centers that I already warned you about. And this is also reflected in our graduate degrees, which involves master and PhD. The most prominent programs that we have are, exactly under forest and agricultural science, and we do have 11 top ranked programs in Brazil. 5 of them are the highest scored or highest top regarded programs in the country, but we still have 6 others that are second tier, quite high on the national assessments. Just a glimpse of our academic year and a few possibilities that we've been exploring lately. We do have a semester year, so we do have 1 and 2 semester a year and a summer semester squeezed in between. Of course, our summer semester, it's late in the year, not mid-year, as usually taking place in the Northern Hemisphere. During these regular academic years, we do have a range of courseworks eligible for undergraduate and graduate students. We even do have Brazilian culture and Portuguese language that is also offered for foreigners. So the regular classes usually for the first term starts in March and extend until June. The second goes from August until November, early December. Most of the classes are in Portuguese, but we have been pushing hard for the last couple of years to increase the number of courses touching in English. And last year at the graduate school, we had 46 courses fully in English, and this tends to expand for the next couple of years. For now, we are in virtual learning, but started from January, some of these courses will be presential, and we are trying to maintain a few of those in English as well, with possibilities of having international students in modalities such as virtual modalities, taking advantage of those. Regarding these possibilities and costs involved, you probably are aware, if it's not, it's worth mentioning that Viçosa is a federal public university, so it's a tuition-free institution. We are not allowed to charge anything from the students. We do have a small enrollment fee to cover these initial expenses or expense of student ID and things like that, but it doesn't go beyond that. Cost of living in Viçosa is relatively low. It's a small city within inner Brazil. It's not a metropolitan area or anything like that. And we do have heavily subsidized restaurants within the university that are actually undergoing cost reviews. So the meal price is likely to increase, but still it's fairly competitive nowadays. You do have the main meals, lunch and dinner, at a cost below $1, which is fairly small, rather symbolic. But this will likely go up, but not that much. Well, in dollar, I mean. in real will be a significant increase. We do have possibilities of internship, collaborative research initiatives, and so on. Besides of our regular courses, we are also open to the possibilities of tailoring courses depending on the agreements that we have with partners, and working out on courses offered with lectures from both institutions, Viçosa and partners. They might be offered synchronous or asynchronous, at a distance, or presential, depending on the objectives designed for the particular initiatives. For the stay in here, our Office of International Affairs provides support and guidance for the incoming students. The university indicates a local advisor to help up, and we do have some assistance from the university ambassadors that will help us receiving the students here, find suitable lodging, and helping up on the day-to-day activities until the students get more comfortable with the new context and scenario. Of course, you're in Brazil, so some traveling is also possible. I should warn or disclose that those pictures are not from Viçosa, they're from elsewhere, but just indicating some possibilities of entertainment across the country that we'll be able to profit from while in an eventual visit to Viçosa. With that, I again welcome you all to this seminar and hope for, in the near future, be able to receive you all in Viçosa for further discussions. Thanks for the opportunity, and I will pass on the word to Edgar to follow up with the talks from our colleagues from Hungary. Thanks again.
So, okay, thank you all. We'll have just a minute to prepare the next lecture, and we'll call you back in a minute, ok? Pessoal, nós vamos estar só organizando aqui a próxima apresentação e vamos voltar com vocês em alguns minutos, tudo bem? Have the questions and the end of the lectures, we'll have the moment. If you want, please just write your questions in the chat and then we'll pass it to the lecturers. Ao final das palestras, nós teremos um período para as perguntas. Então, por favor, quem tiver alguma pergunta, pode deixá-las aqui no chat e nós as enviaremos para os professores, ok? Obrigado. Okay, fellows, we'll have now the lecture of Professor Carlos. He's the coordinator of the post-graduation course in plant. Okay. Professor.
Good morning. I will present em português. Programa de pós-graduação em Plant Science, fitotecnia em português, foi muito bem apresentado já pelo professor Raul, a Universidade Federal de Viçosa. Esta universidade, ela possui 65 cursos de graduação e 53 programas de pós-graduação. Esses programas têm uma tradição e excelência em pesquisas em ciências agrárias, o que nos torna reconhecidos internacionalmente. E este ano completamos 95 anos da Universidade Federal de Viçosa e 60 anos do primeiro programa de pós-graduação em Plant Science. A história, em 1959, foi acordado com Purdue University um acordo de cooperação para o aperfeiçoamento, principalmente dos professores da Universidade Federal de Viçosa. E este acordo de cooperação possibilitou a instalação, em 1961, do primeiro programa de pós-graduação na Universidade Federal de Viçosa, intitulado de Mestrado em Horticultura. Em 1961 ainda, nós tivemos a primeira defesa, aonde tivemos, então, a titulação do primeiro estudante deste programa, o senhor José de Almeida Soares. Quais são os objetivos do programa? Dentre os objetivos que temos, eles são de oportunizar a educação e a formação de pesquisadores e administradores nas demandas profissionais do mercado brasileiro e mundial, além de oportunizar a formação e educação de futuros professores, em programas de graduação que vai ocorrer em áreas das ciências agrárias no Brasil. Então, esses professores estarão habilitados a ministrarem aulas em vários programas de graduação no Brasil. E, além disso, buscamos desenvolver novas tecnologias para aumentar a eficiência da produção agrícola brasileira e mundial, promovendo a sustentabilidade e a preservação do ambiente. Nossas linhas de pesquisa. Então, nós temos 6 linhas, melhoramento de plantas, recursos genéticos e biotecnologia, agricultura orgânica e agroenergia, fisiologia da produção e manejo pós-colheita de produtos hortícolas ou produtos agrícolas, nutrição mineral, fertilização e produção de culturas, plantas daninhas, pragas, doenças e impactos no ambiente, sementes e propagação vegetativa. A estrutura do nosso programa é composto de uma comissão coordenadora, que inclui um coordenador, mais alguns membros, assistentes administrativos e representação estudantil. Então, eu sou o coordenador do programa. Nós temos ainda a professora Denise, o professor Carlos, Nick, o professor Fernando Fing como membros do comitê, a discente Renata Pedrosa como representante estudantil e as assistentes administrativas Tatiane e Lídia. Em termos de orientadores no nosso programa, o programa ele possui hoje 32 orientadores. Vou passar, né, o nome e as especialidades de cada um a vocês. Professor Aloysio Borém, com melhoramento de plantas, biossegurança em plantas, a parte de genômica e fenômica em melhoramento de plantas. Professor Antônio Alberto, manejo integrado de plantas daninhas e o comportamento de herbicidas no solo. Eu trabalho, né, com o melhoramento de plantas e o cultivo de frutos tropicais. Professor Carlos Nick, melhoramento de plantas, o manejo e a conservação de recursos genéticos. Professora Denise, a fisiologia, o desenvolvimento, germinação e dormência de sementes. Professor Derli trabalha com melhoramento de tomate e cannabis, além de recursos genéticos. Professor Edgar, um anfitrião deste evento, ele trabalha com a parte, né, de anatomia descritiva e ampliada e cultura de tecidos. Professor Eduardo, processamento e análise de semente. Felipe, genética quantitativa e melhoramento de soja. Fernando Fing, pós-colheita de frutos, vegetais e ornamentais. Professor Francisco, biologia de plantas daninhas, né, comportamento dessas plantas daninhas no ambiente e a parte de integração lavoura-pecuária hoje está muito crescente no Brasil. Professor Hermínia, nutrição e crescimento de plantas, fertilidade do solo e nutrição mineral de cafeeiros. Professor João Carlos, nutrição mineral de milho e sistemas de agroecologia. Professor José Antônio, floricultura, produção de flores, propagação de plantas ornamentais e a parte de controle de crescimento de plantas e controle do florescimento e a fisiologia pós-colheita. Professor José Cola, zoologia ampliada, fitossanidade e entomologia agrícola. Professor José Eustáquio, manejo, cultivo e melhoramento de feijoeiro. Professor Júlio César, fertilidade do solo e fertilizantes e nutrição de plantas florestais e os solos florestais também. Professor Laércio, produção e tecnologia de sementes. Professor Leonardo, fertilidade do solo e fertilizantes, fisiologia de plantas, agroenergia, sorgo e macaúba plant. Professor Luiz Antônio, melhoramento de plantas e agroenergia. Professor Maicon, quantitativo genéticos e melhoramento de trigo. Professor Marcelo, entomologia agrícola e defesa fitossanitária. Professor Márcio, manejo, cultivo e melhoramento de cana-de-açúcar. Professor Matheus, citros e manga, a parte ecofisiologia dessas culturas. Professor Maurício, microbiologia do solo e bioquímica e associação micorrizas. Professor Ney, manejo, cultivo e melhoramento de cafeeiro. Professor Paulo César, nutrição mineral de plantas, produção de vegetais e proteção ao ambiente. Professor Raquel, manejo de pastagens e integração, sistemas de integração lavoura-pecuária. Professor Ricardo, sistemas agroecológicos e ciclagem de nutrientes. Professor Rodrigo, genética quantitativa e melhoramento de milho. Professor Sérgio, agroenergia e melhoramento de macaúba ou sorgo. Em 2017, o programa ele recebeu a nota 6 num ranking de 3 a 7. né, o que demonstra a visibilidade internacional do programa. O programa ele possui dois processos seletivos ao ano, com entradas em março e agosto. E a seleção é por um exame escrito e também pela análise do currículo vitae, né, do candidato. E no primeiro ano, tanto do mestrado como do PhD, o estudante ele tem uma intensa rotina de aulas, né, para obter os créditos necessários e depois ele se dedica à pesquisa. Sobre ainda o programa, em número de estudantes, no mestrado nós possuímos 47 estudantes, doutorado 95, profissionais titulados no mestrado 1.221 e no doutorado 605. E temos apoio, né, do CNPq, o Conselho Nacional de Ensino e Desenvolvimento Tecnológico, sim, o Conselho, né, a Coordenação de Aperfeiçoamento de Pessoal de Nível Superior, a CAPES, e no estado de Minas Gerais, assistência da Fundação de Assistência e Pesquisa de Minas Gerais. Em termos de pesquisas, nosso programa está estruturado em 25 laboratórios, mais alguns laboratórios parceiros. Algumas pesquisas de destaques, de interesse. Então, nós temos a pesquisa em evolução, né, a parte de análise de híbridos comerciais de milho para caracteres agronômicos na utilização, né, eficiência de nitrogênio. Na parte de milho ainda, nós temos um painel de linhagens, onde está sendo feito um screening, né, para contrastante em milho tropical, visando melhoramento para níveis, né, de nitrogênio. Temos também, nas nossas pesquisas, a seleção de linhagens de trigo tropical, visando principalmente o cultivo em condições de temperaturas mais elevadas. E um screening para tolerância a calor neste trigo tropical. Em fruticultura, nós desenvolvemos pesquisas com o controle do crescimento da tangerineira pocã, o mandarim, utilizando a garfagem com o trifoliata flydagon. E em pêssego, a formação do fruto do pessegueiro após a aplicação de alguns estimulantes de crescimento em climas tropical de altitude, temperaturas aí bastante elevadas. No mais, eu agradeço. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Carlos. I forgot to thank Professor Raul for your presentations. Now we have Professor Mesterhazy. I welcome you, and we're just okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Professor. Good morning.
Good morning. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fine.
I welcome you, and we're just okay. Thank you, Professor. Good morning.
Good morning. Do you hear me? Yes. Yes. Okay.
Professor, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Could you share your screen, please?
Good morning. Do you hear me? Yes. Yes. Okay.
Professor, can you hear me?
Yes. 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 I hear you. Okay.
Could you share your screen, please?
Will I speak from the file I have sent you, or I have to make the presentation from my file?
Could you make presentation from your file? If you have any problems, I will use my computer to share your file, but if you could,
I think
just use your PC.
that will be maybe better when it,
If you have any problems, I will use my computer to share your file.
I think that would be a better solution because
Okay, I will share. Just one moment.
okay, thank you. I think that would be a better solution because
Okay, I will share. Just one moment.
okay, thank you. Okay. I think that would be a better solution because okay, that is. Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay. Okay, that is. That's good, okay. And should I say next or can I go in from my... Okay, so when we... Ladies and gentlemen... That's good, okay. Okay. And, should I say next or can I go in from my... I think I will say next, and so, in this case, ladies and gentlemen. So first, thank you very much for the invitation. And when we have planned this, I will say next, and in this case, not next yet. I will say next when I would like to see the next. Thank you very much for the invitation. Okay. And when we have planned this, I will say next. When we were planning this, I will say next when I would like to see the next. Okay. Okay, so we have planning this.
Sorry, Professor. We are having some technical problems. Just 1 second.
Oh, but okay, I so don't.
Sorry, Professor. We are having some technical problems. Just 1 second.
I don't.
Dr. Akels, could you please turn off the YouTube sound so you can avoid some echoes? Dr. Akels, could you please turn off the YouTube sound so you can avoid some echoes?
Okay, so I can share my file also when you have a problem.
Professor,
Okay, so
we just
I
shared.
can share my file also when you have a problem.
Okay, I have now. Okay, I see now. It is. I don't know. It is your file or my file.
Okay, so you just share my file also when you have a problem. Okay, I have now.
Professor, is our file.
I see
So
now.
when you have, when you want to trade for the next slide, just ask, then we will put
Okay.
to the next one.
Next file, please.
Is our file. So when you have, when you want to trade for the next slide, just ask, then we will put to the next one.
Okay,
Next
then
slide,
please the next file.
So when you have, when you want to trade for
The first slide is about the global food security in grains, and
please the next file.
not yet. I would like to speak something about this file now. Okay.
The first slide is about the global food.
Yes. Here the point is, we have published it with.
I would like to speak something about this file now.
Yes.
The first slide is about the global food. Yes. Here the point is, we have published it with. I would like to speak something about this file. Yes.
I don't see now the picture, the slide. Okay. So the point of this file is that from the total, I see it is okay now. I see everything. So
Professor.
there is a total grain production capacity in the world about more than 3,000 million tons, the red number above. And
there is a total grain production capacity in the
Professor, can you close the YouTube?
1,000 million tons, the red number above.
And the mycotoxin contamination is about 10% of the harvested amount. That's about 220 million tons grain, which is above.
Mycotoxin contamination is about 10% of the harvested amount. That's about 220 million tons grain, which is above
the allowed limits. So that means this is the amount which has severe problem. And as this is a very high amount, and jeopardizes food safety and feed safety, therefore it should be decreased as much as possible.
Food safety and feed safety, therefore it should be decreased as much as possible.
In the past 50 years, we made a lot of plant resistance work and toxicological work, and we came to the conclusion that among the registered varieties or hybrids, we have found a large variability that should be utilized. That means that the more susceptible varieties should be excluded from the commercial production, or during the variety registration, they should be banned to go into the commercial production. Next, next slide. In this wheat slide, you see a highly susceptible variety at a natural epidemics, which is highly susceptible. On the right side, this is much better. You see a highly susceptible variety at a natural epidemics. And on the, is highly susceptible. On the right side, this is much better. So you can see that this is also not full resistant, but when you look the picture below, in the highly susceptible one, you have a lot of contaminated and infected grains. That is the left lower picture. Below, in the highly susceptible one, you have a lot of contaminated and infected grains. That is the left lower picture. In the right lower picture, you see the head of a more resistant variety. Here you have only one contaminated spikelet, but above it and below it, you have normally developed grains. Next slide, please. Contaminated spikelet, but above it and below it, I don't want to speak too much about this picture. You see that in maize, the three major pathogens are Fusarium graminearum, Fusarium verticillioides, and Aspergillus flavus, with rather variable symptoms. The three major pathogens are Fusarium graminearum, Fusarium verticillioides, and Aspergillus flavus. Next slide, please. When we see the economic losses due to these toxigenic fungi, we see, as I mentioned before, that's about 220 billion tons globally. But it is not only a loss of the plant production, but we have very high losses in the animal husbandry, because poisoning by DON, zearalenone, fumonizins, and aflatoxins make very heavy economic losses. And of course, not only the animals are jeopardized, but also the people. So it is also a health problem for the people. But we can estimate that the losses in the animal husbandry are about 50% of the plant production losses. But we can estimate that the losses next slide, please. In the animal husbandry are about 50% of the plant production losses. When we look the past 50 years, we see that the mycotoxin contamination closely correlates with the epidemics of the given fungi. This is so for the Fusarium graminearum, but somewhat less valid for Fusarium verticillioides and Aspergillus flavus, because they are significantly less pathogenic. Már beszélek. Szia. Igen. YouTube az melyik az?
Már beszélek.
A StreamYardot kapcsoljam ki? Ja, az a webinárió.
YouTube az melyik az?
Így most jobb? Oké. Most kikapcsoltam, és most hallatok engem? Tehát akkor most rögtön... Oké. So, it is clear what I am saying now. Okay, so the mycotoxin contamination on the field and the epidemics have a rather close correlation, and therefore came the idea that a higher resistance could reduce significantly the mycotoxin contamination. And that was a main research part of the last decades to find out how the toxin contamination and how the epidemics and epidemic severity could correlate with each other. And therefore, we have tested a lot of hybrids and registered cultivars. And by this way, we came to several conclusions which can also be important for this Brazil project. Next slide. Do you hear me? Hello? Do you hear me?
Hi, Professor. We can hear you.
Okay. So when we look at the standard resistant testing to Fusarium head blight in wheat, we see that the published articles use, except several cases, only one inoculum. This can be a single isolate or a mixture of the isolates. Conidium concentration, which is often used in the research to regulate aggressiveness, is mostly given, but actually most of the paper give a conidium concentration, but no aggressiveness level. So that means that the conidium concentration is not used to regulate aggressiveness, but simply they give a conidium concentration because an article had a conidium concentration 5 years ago, the same one. But in this, excuse me, but by this way, an aggressiveness control cannot be made. And when we see the papers, also the severity of the disease they can produce by this way is often not satisfactory. The other problem is that most of the papers in wheat and concentrate on the head symptoms, but Fusarium damaged kernels and deoxynivalenol are not tested. I have seen a sentence that it is too expensive, but more important question is how the Fusarium damaged kernel dawn and visual symptoms correlate or not correlate with each other. And the further problem that a larger number of the papers use type 2 resistance, but the type 2 resistance produces about 50% of the total resistance of the plant, for example, in SOMA 3. And the type 1 resistance, which is only mentioned several times, but it is not considered seriously, but it is the second part of the resistance reservoir we would need to have, we would need it. So, next slide. When we see the isolate roles, that's a beat test with 8 different isolates, you see that the fusarium damaged kernels for the 20 varieties with different resistance level are very variable. That means that by using any of that, a correct resistance estimation doesn't seem to be possible. But when you see this red line in the middle, you see that really the means of the responses to 8 isolates give a non-hectic and pretty nice increasing curve. And by this way, the resistance differences can be estimated with a much higher correctness. In the other picture in the right side, you see the same thing in deoxynivalenol contamination. And it is a nice thing here, at the most resistant materials, all 8 isolates have nearly zero non-contamination, but at increasing susceptibility, the variation of the data is growing and growing up to 70 ppm. Next slide, please. When we, in this 4 years test, we produced resistance aggressiveness levels. That means in each year we have classified the 4 isolates we worked according to their aggressiveness, and accordingly we counted the other traits. So when you see here at low aggressiveness level, the differentiation of the varieties is rather poor, somewhat better at medium aggressiveness, and the best is when the aggressiveness is high. You can often hear that when you make a very strong infection, you destroy everything and there will be no resistant differences at all. But this contradicts here, because the most resistant material has about 2 ppm, but 2% FDK, but the highest susceptibility has about 30. So it means that we can have a better estimation of the resistance when the aggressiveness is higher. And when you see here the DON, you can see the same thing. At the lowest aggressiveness level, the variety differences are not convincing, but they are much more convincing when the aggressiveness level and the DON productivity is higher. Next, please. We have made with Austrian colleagues an experiment with descendant of the Sumai 3 having 3BS and 5ES QTL, and the people in Thun tested about 300 DH plants, and from that 24 were selected with both QTL, 1 QTL, the 3BS, 5A, and where both QTLs were present. So when we see the visual symptoms, we have large differences between the two QTLs, but the combined effect of the two QTLs was always better. When we see the FDK, here the two QTLs are closer to each other, significantly differing from the no QTL group, but here we have a much larger difference in FDK when the two QTLs are present in the plant. And the same feature is also for DON. And here the 3BS QTL in a number of plants, about half of the plants, gives lower DON, but you could not forecast from this head blight severity data. And the lowest DON contamination you find when the two QTLs, the 3BS and 5A, working together. In the next picture, we show the same thing. So the no QTL group, the 3BS 5A and the 3BS 5AS group, but as this experiment was made with different Fusarium species, you can see a very important thing. So between the two QTLs, there is actually no significant difference to different Fusarium species. Therefore, we are saying that we don't have in wheat Fusarium graminearum problem, but a Fusarium problem, because the QTLs which are protecting against Fusarium graminearum are protecting also against the other Fusarium species, which is good news for the breeding. Next slide, please. There is another problem. We have made a QTL determination from Frontana and Minimano. Frontana is the Brazilian spring type wheat, which has a good medium resistance, and Minimano was a Hungarian highly susceptible variety. And when you see here, we have found 15 QTLs, but with different functions. So we have found two QTLs having an influence only on the visual symptoms, but nothing else. Here we have 7 QTLs which influenced Fusarium head blight and FDK, but no toxin contamination. We have found only 2 QTLs which regulated together FDK and DON, and for breeding purposes, it is important that we have found 4 QTLs that regulated all 3 traits. So that means I think the molecular genetic background of our wheat breeding programs will be much more complicated than we have thought earlier, and these different function of the QTLs should be considered when we will make a breeding program. Next slide, please. From 1914, you can see here about 200 genotypes which were tested for Fusarium head blight resistance. They are FDK and DON data. So what you see here, so the correlation is rather close, 0.75, no problem. But here you have at low severity several genotypes with very high toxin contamination. And when you see the right picture, here we had 96 replicates behind each data. This was a 4 years experiment with 3 different inoculation methods. The point is here that we have found of the 40 genotypes tested, there were registered varieties, 6 genotypes which produce significantly more DON, which could be countered by the general behavior of the population. And we have found 2 genotypes which showed significantly lower DON than what we would have expected by the regular FDK data. And here these are important because when it is highly susceptible, high infection severity, it will be discarded anyway. But when you have a DON overproducer at low infection severity, it will be a problem and you can have many different consequences of that. From here, we made the correlations from this test for 5 years. I see only the main result. The main correlation between Fusarium herbicide and Fusarium damaged kernel is 0.62. Fusarium herbicide and DON only 0.45, and FDK and DON 0.67. That means that for forecasting of the possible DON contamination, the FDK is a much better trait. Next one, please. Next one, please. Okay. The resistance differences what we have in our wheat population, that is a highly susceptible material. You can see very high rate of the white kernels due to Fusarium damage. That is a medium susceptible. In this experiment, we use 2 different isolates, more and less aggressive isolates. They are the moderate susceptible, that is super susceptible, susceptible to moderate susceptible. Here on the higher aggressiveness shows severe symptoms, not so much like here, but against the less aggressive isolate, it is quite better. The moderately resistant wheat samples, they are containing Sumay-3 and Nobeocobozuline spring wheat sources. You can see several white kernels, and here actually maybe here or here you can see from the 300-400 kernels from the artificially inoculated bunches. So that means with this high resistance, maybe you would need any fungicide treatment in the field. Next one, please. The conclusions for the wheat are that reliable resistance result need the use of more isolates. In our case, we use 4. As head spring inoculation covers all resistant types, type 2, type 1, type 2, type 3, 4, 5, and maybe also others. So that means for variety resistance testing, the spraying inoculation is the key, and the type 2 resistance is only a partial thing, but it doesn't give the full resistance of the material, and therefore I think it has only a scientific significance, but not for a significance for practical breeding. The other thing is that the QTS 3BS and 5A are Fusarium species non-specific. That means that they protect effectively against Fusarium avernaceum or Fusarium poe, for example. We have just mentioned that the FDK has a much closer relation to DON than disease index, and therefore for breeding decisions, the FDK is much more useful. And as we have found tenfold or higher differences, as you have seen before, between genotypes and varieties, it is clear that these highly susceptible genotypes should be not allowed in the commercial production or should be withdrawn, because we have the fungicide tests and we see that even the best fungicide cannot have enough strength to control disease when the epidemic conditions are very dangerous and the variety is very susceptible. So with this, we have created a new methodology which can be used much better to identify and to breed more resistant varieties against Fusarium head blight in wheat than before. Next one, please. In the maize, the epidemics and toxin contamination show a similar picture. During the decades in Hungary, we could identify all three major fungi. That means Fusarium graminearum, verticillioides, and Aspergillus flavus, and also their toxins as pre-harvest phenomenon. Next one, please. How does it look like standard resistance testing in two air rods? Normally, as in wheat, one isolate is used. Conidium concentration follows the earlier patterns. No aggressiveness test is made, and infection results are variable. Most papers deal with one pathogenic species. Normally, air rot amount is controlled, toxins rarely. For two reasons. It is expensive, as everybody knows that, but there is also another conviction that the toxin contamination and the visual symptom severity shows such a close correlation that makes a regular toxin control not necessary. So this is not the case what we could prove. So that is one thing. The second thing is that most of the paper working with one pathogenic species, but in Hungary, for example, in some years we have graminearum, in other years verticillioides, and in another year Aspergillus flavus, and toxins maybe all three might be present at the same time. And a similar situation is often happens also in other maize producing areas. Therefore, we need resistance to all of the main air rot pathogens. Resistance to two Fusarium species is made in several places on the world, mostly in research, mostly for research, but not for serial resistance testing. And three different species are used at present only in Hungary. Inoculations use mostly the silk channel method. So with this method, in Hungary, we did not have good infection results. The toothpick method gave threefold larger infection severity and also in toxin much higher levels. Therefore, under all dry conditions, this method is much better, and therefore, since about 15 years, we use only this method. But how can we solve the problems? Next slide, please. When we work with more isolates, you can see in red bars the 4 epidemic situations with aflatoxin. In blue, you see DON, and the green, fumonisin B1 and B2. So what you see here is a very large variability. So the highly susceptible genotypes to Aspergillus flavus, so you can see which are them. But here, for example, to this isolate, we have found 3 genotypes actually with no aflatoxin, but the same hybrid to other isolates shows much larger bars. But on the other side, we have also several genotypes which have very low numbers to all disease situations. And you can see also the same thing for Fusarium graminearum. So that is the point also for maize, that when we use more isolates, in this case, they are results from 2 years by 2 isolates. So it means that we can produce as a mean product much higher reliability of the data, and because we should have a data set which is convincing and reliable, because it would be a big mistake to exclude a more resistant variety by mistake in methodology and allow to the commercial production a susceptible one. Next one, please. This is a set of 20 hybrids, and in the right side they are the ranks from 1 to 18 of the hybrids, and the point is here that we have 4 hybrids where the bars are lower than the means. So that means here we can speak more or less a similar resistance to different toxigenic species. Here on the left side, you see that we have 3 hybrids with very high bars. That means from 12 to 18 in the ranges. So that means here we can say, okay, they are nearly equally susceptible to our fungi. And here the red bar shows the check data from the not inoculated controls. Now, Valkyr, for example, is very interesting because it is highly susceptible to Fusarium graminearum, but has a very good resistance to all other 3. And we have here in the not marked genotypes very different reactions to different species and different behavior in control. So that means that from Fusarium graminearum result, you cannot conclude anything to Fusarium verticillioides and Aspergillus flavus. Therefore, we should make separate resistance tests against them. Next slide. When we look the 4 data sets of the registered maize hybrids to Fusarium graminearum, they are DON data. So we have found these blue highlighted hybrids which gave similar results to the 4 isolates, to the 2 isolates in 2 years. And the colors are coming so that which are lower than average. In this case, for example, 56 ppm, which are lower than 28, for example, they are dark green, then light green are up to 56, and when you give the 50%, so when you give it 25%, that means about 75. It is light, so yellow, and the orange is which is above 75%. So that means we need hybrids which have low data, load on data in all these situations. But we have also hybrids where very low and a very high dawn contamination in different epidemic situations can be present. So that means by this way we can we can select the more stable varieties or hybrids, and you can see here also the variance of the data. So here we marked with blue those which have lower than 1000. But for Zephyr, this hybrid, we have the variance more than 10,000. So one thing is sure that when we have a highly susceptible hybrid and it gives some by chance low infection rate, it doesn't mean it is resistant. So therefore we need more data to see something. Well, next one, please. The same thing for Fusarium verticillioides, the fumonisin contamination. Here you see 3 hybrids with green, light or dark, Armagnac, Pioneer 9415 and Syngenta Talisman, and in the other, highly variable performance. And that is what we should consider, that in these, for example, Armagnac or this Pioneer hybrid, is the probability is large that also in other situation you will get this stability. But for the others where very high values are given, for example here, very low, very high, and medium, and so on. So by this way, you can evaluate your hybrids to toxin risk. And when we look the Aspergillus flavus, next slide. Here in 19, we had here the maximums for Aspergillus flavus isolate 1, 400 ppb. The same here hybrid and the same isolate next year gave very low. So 79, it is higher than 20, but 79 compared to the 400 is very low. But here we see also other things. For example, here is Syngenta, or the Syngenta zoan. Here is the first years. You are happy that you think you have an excellent material, and in the next year, here is a result about 5,000 ppb. And the means are showing also that from 37 to 1,258. So this is about 40 times difference. And when you see the variances, here we have 842,000, and it is a best case, Confites, which has a very stable reaction, only 179. So that means also into Aspergillus flavus, we might find varieties, hybrids, which give a low and stable performance, which is extremely important when you have, for example, dairy production and dairy stand with milk production. Next one, please. Here we compared in this figure the Fusarium graminearum and DON contamination in the hybrids. And we have two hybrids which are DON overproducer. So the correlation is with them 0.50, but when we take them out, it is more than 0.70. So that means, and what you see also, that the majority of the hybrids responds similarly to the disease and toxin. We have the same thing also for Fusarium verticilioides. Here we have two toxin producer that makes correlation, actually destroys correlation. The correlation is not significant. But when you take out the system, these two data, your correlation is significant. So that means the majority of the hybrids respond similarly to disease and toxin. The most curious picture we got in Aspergillus flavus, and in Aspergillus flavus we have found 8 genotypes, which has very high aflatoxin contamination. Next slide, please.
Just one moment, Professor. We have some difficulties.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. So in Aspergillus flavus, we have 5 genotypes with very high aflatoxin contamination from 600 to 1200 ppb, but from the rest, the maximum is only about 270 or so. Here, of course, correlation is not significant when you take all things, but here when we take out these 5 extra aflatoxin producing genotypes, the correlation is close to, is about significant at about 10%. So the point is that this toxin overproduction is about 10-15, in Aspergillus flavus about 20% of the total genotypes, and therefore we have to pay attention to this. And the point is here, the infection severity 0.1%. To this severity we have about 5 ppb, but actually with the same infection severity you can have also 1200. So that means that for aflatoxin, the symptoms are the least reliable among all the toxigenic species, and therefore, without toxin measurement, I would not allow any hybrid on the commercial production. Next one, please. That is a general table, a 2-year summary. Here we have error data. Here we have artificial toxin data. Here we have error data in the check and error and the toxin data from the Czech. Also phone numbers are here. So I don't want to speak too much about it, but I would like to point out one thing here. We have two hybrid, Harmonium and Talisman, which have dark green or green numbers for all toxins. Here we have some higher numbers in infection severity, but infection severity is not too high, so here I think we can allow this. But in this case, we have very good toxin data, and for us the toxin is much more important because when you sell corn, it is not according to the infection severity by the toxin contamination. The point is here that we have here 5 hybrids with very high aflatoxin contamination in the control. And in some cases, we have aflatoxin, so agreement, for example, by this hybrid, 600 in artificial and 800 in natural infection. But we have also a case where, for example, Cleopatra's lower data are here for Aspergillus flavus and higher data here. So, and what we need to do to evaluate the risk of a given hybrid, we have to know separately the data for Fusarium graminearum verticilloides Aspergillus flavus, the Don reaction separately, and also the Czech reaction to know the background infection, and this should put together to a system. Of course, this is 2 years, but we want to increase now the number of isolates to 3 and the locations will be increased also to 2 or 3. And by this way, in 2 years, you can have a good, reliable data. Next slide, please. So when we use more isolates, as in wheat, also for maize, and we make separately the resistance test with all important fungi which occur in our region, and we measure also the toxin responses. So in this case, we have the chance to select those hybrids which will result much higher food and feed safety. And the other remark here that as we don't have effective fungicide protection in maize, there are of course several experiments for that. We have also unpublished results, but not very good until now. Anyway, the resistance is the only thing that is really effective. So therefore, we should select for higher resistance worldwide, and we suppose it will be so, as we have found in wheat, that at higher resistance, the fungicide have also a better effect. So by this way, the strength of the protection can be higher. Next slide, please. Okay, susceptible hybrid, left high, Fusarium graminearum, left high left, graminearum, upper right, Fusarium verticilloides, lower left, Aspergillus flavus, and the Czech, So that means you can see the differences, and this is highly susceptible, and we here have aflatoxin also a high amount. Next one, please. And that is one of the most best resistant hybrid. That is from Szeged. We have some Fusarium graminearum, but actually nothing else. Next one. We have some recent publications. When you get the slides, you can identify them. Next one, please. Acknowledgements for the supporters of the research and for the colleagues who worked together with me. Next one, please. And thank you for your attention and patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Atticus, for your presentation. We're sorry for any technical problems that we might have faced in here. And we'll have the questions at the ending of our webinar, okay?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you, Professor Atticus. Now we'll have the lecture of Professor Pop. I have already presented him here in the chat, and we'll welcome you, Professor, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much. I tried to share my presentation. My question is whether, can you see the presentation or not?
Yes, Professor, we can see.
Okay. So I feel honored to be here today and give you a presentation on the present stage of the circular bioeconomy and the European Union, and thank the organizers for the invitation. As you see, the title of my presentation is European Green Deal, Sustainable Circular Bioeconomy Towards 2050. I try to page down. I don't know, how can I page down? Okay, that's fine. Outline European Green Deal, Circular Economy, Bioeconomy, Bio-East countries. These are the Central and Eastern European member states, and finally conclusion. Next. The main message of the European Green Deal is the net zero greenhouse gas emissions target for 2050 to achieve climate neutrality. Next. Next one. Circular economy. Today we live in a linear economy. That's the take, make, and waste model. 93 billion tons of virgin raw materials were extracted in 2015, and almost 70% of resource use are from finite resources, limited resources. Only 9% are reused, recycled, or remanufactured. So about 68% of input raw materials becomes waste and are either landfilled or incinerated, just burned. Next. Disadvantages of the linear economy: depletion of natural resources, environmental pollutions and climate change, damages caused to ecosystem and biodiversity, and economic disadvantages. That's known for everybody. The question arises, why circular economy? The structural waste in the food system is very high. 31% of food produced is lost or wasted. The waste in the mobility sector is even higher. A typical European car is parked 92% of time. An average European car has 5 seats but carries 5.5 people per trip. In addition, 50% of most city land is dedicated to streets and roads, parking, service stations, driveways, signals, and traffic signs. Here you can see the structural waste in the built environment. First, construction. 10 to 15% of building material are wasted during construction. So new building materials. Utilization sector. 60% of European offices are not used even in working hours. Usage. 20 to 40% of energy in existing building can be profitably conserved, but isn't. And end of life, 54% of demolition materials is landfilled. Principles of the circular economy. Take, make, and no waste, or at least minimum waste. Design out waste and pollution. Keep products in materials and materials in use with maintenance, reuse, redistribution, remanufacture, recycle, etc., and regenerate natural systems. But we still have several barriers to circular economy: cultural, technological, market, and regulatory barriers. For example, a cultural barrier is lack of awareness or interest. Technological lack of proven technologies. Market barrier, high investment cost plus limited funding. Regulatory, lack of policies to support circular economy transition. Tools of the circular economy are called business models. These are sustainable design, sharing, maintenance and repair, renovation, remanufacturing, recycling, or recycling during the manufacturing process, and reuse. I show 5 business models briefly. First, circular supplies. For example, Vollebak produces t-shirt made from pulped eucalyptus, beech, and algae, which biodegrade in 12 weeks, in 3 months. Resource recovery and recycling. For example, toast ale, bread waste to beer. Traditionally, bread was processed into kvass, a drink similar to beer. Even tradition is also innovation. Kvass is known in Latvia and Poland in Europe. Third model, product life extension. For example, Kayo repairs and resell the unwanted furniture to new buyers and share profit with previous owners. Sharing economy is applied widely. For example, Spinlister, a sharing platform, allows bike owners to list their bikes available for renting, but we can do that with cars and motorbikes as well. And finally, product as a service. For example, Philips provides pay-per-lux lighting services to the business customers who wants to purchase light but not the associated lighting infrastructure. On the right-hand side, you see the Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam, and you buy light without an investment. Investment is done by Philips. Out of the 5 business models, 2 of them are linked to bioeconomy, namely circular supplies model and resource recovery and recycling. But the other 3, product life extension, sharing platforms, and product as a service, are linked to the circular economy. A business model defines the ways an organization creates, delivers, and captures value. You see, extraction, processing phase, design, manufacture, retail, use, end-of-life, disposal. And in order to minimize waste, we need repair, reuse, remanufacturing, and recycling as a tool of the circular economy. Another question is whether technology will close the loop. Industry 4.0 and the development of the circular economy are mutually reinforcing tools that support the emergence of Industry 4.0 can accelerate and ease the transition to circularity. Bioeconomy. What is bioeconomy? The bioeconomy encompasses those parts of the economy that use renewable biological resources from land and water to produce food, biomaterials, bioenergy, and bioproducts. What is the message of the bioeconomy? Decoupling energy, materials, and products from fossil energy resources. Replacing fossil carbon with renewable carbon can be done by biocarbon or biomass or recycled carbon based on the carbon circular economy. For example, if you capture CO2 from the atmosphere and produce plastics, it's called renewable carbon. If you produce from used plastics, new plastics, then you use the renewable carbon because you do not need virgin raw materials for the production of plastics. The next wave of economy is bioeconomy, which produces economic growth and well-being. The natural resource economy lasted until 1800, as the steam engine was invented. Coal mines opened immediately. 100 years later, with the invention of the combustion engine, oil and gas extraction started. And we are still in the era of a fossil economy. Today, just 20% of energy is renewable energy, and 80% of energy used is fossil energy. And hopefully by 2050, we reach bioeconomy fully in the European Union. Most of the aims of the bioeconomy are complementary or identical to the Sustainable Development Goals. What are the principles of sustainable bioeconomy? To solve food first issue. So food first all the time. To ensure sustainable yields, to have cascading approach for biomass use, to minimize waste, to secure circularity, and to sustain the diversity of production systems. But we have trade-offs between biomaterials, bioenergy, and farming, even between fiber, fuel, or food production, and with other services provided by ecosystems. Bioeconomy is more than circular economy. Substitution of non-renewables with biomass is part of the circular economy. Here you can see that agriculture and forestry produce biomass. Biomass is processed mainly to food and feed. Secondly, to bioenergy and biofuels today, but it will change to chemicals and other biomaterials and bio-based products. And you can see the tools of the circular economy: share, maintain, reuse, redistribution, remanufacturing, and even organic recycling is very important. Organic recycling of biomass. We can see the added value to the biomass from the bottom to the top. The top shows the highest added value, the bottom, the lowest added value. So let's go from the bottom to the top. Bottom, low added value energy, first generation biofuels, wood products, and paper. A little bit higher added value, second generation fuels, then construction, composite production, chemicals production, food and feed, and finally pharmaceuticals, products and additives. Bioeconomy means the production of biomass. The bio-based economy means the processing of biomass into food and feed, textiles, wearing apparel, paper and pulp, furniture. Biorefineries will produce biofuels, bio-based chemicals, bio-based plastics, and biogas. The synergies between the bioeconomy and circular economy concepts are significant, and the circular economy can work complementary to the bioeconomy. One industry's waste could turn out to be another's raw material. For example, fabric is made from pineapple leaf for the fashion industry. And polyester produced in the chemical industry is used by the fashion industry. Or plastic is used for the production of electronics for vehicle manufacture. What is the value added in the EU bioeconomy by sectors? The value added is not much more higher than the value added of agriculture and food. The value added of agriculture and food is about 3% in the EU, and the value added of the bioeconomy is 4.2% of GDP. In the near future, a rapid increase of the production of bio-based chemicals, plastics, pharmaceuticals, rubber, and wood products for the construction industry can be expected. %8 of total employment are employed by the bioeconomy, by agriculture and food 78%, but in case you produce very high value added, like bio-based chemicals, plastics, pharmaceuticals, You do not need a lot of people as employment. Bio-East countries, these are the Central and Eastern European countries. Cyprus and Malta is excluded. All other new member states are included. 2 months ago, the Bio-East Foresight exercise study was published, and the main message of this study is that the transition to a circular and sustainable bioeconomy in the Bio-East countries must be a political priority to enable bio-based sectors to create bio-based products and services with higher added value. 5 experts were selected by the Commission, and I was included in these 5 experts. Bio-East Foresight exercise conclusions. It's important because Brazil is in the same situation today. Bio-East countries lack bioeconomy strategy and action plans. We don't have a long-term strategic thinking. Experts identified scenarios from business as usual to a fully fledged bioeconomy to help policymakers understand why it is important to invest in the bioeconomy. The linear bioeconomy, it's a mistake that the linear economy plays an important role in the Bio-East countries and is supported. Therefore, stakeholders need to develop and invest in new business models where the bioeconomy is based on higher value-added bio-based solutions that replace fossil equivalents. Bio-East countries need a specific education system for the bioeconomy and bridge the innovation gap by strengthening civil society good governance and the development of national bioeconomy strategies and research agendas. Furthermore, attracting private investors and entrepreneurs and fostering cooperation within countries and across the macro region are key. The macro region, these are the new member states, the Central and Eastern European countries in the EU. The main challenge is overcoming the innovation and deployment gap. Moving up in the scale of technology readiness level is very important from TRL 3 and 4 to TRL 7 to 9. So commercialization projects to be developed is highly important. TRL 7 to 9. That's the market introduction of a project. More and better biorefineries are needed. Conclusion, will it be easy? A lot of people do not believe to achieve full bioeconomy by 2050, even in the EU. When asked why it is that mankind has stretched so far as to discover the structure of the atom, but we have not been able to devise the political means to keep the atom from destroying us, Einstein replied, "That is simple, my friend. It's because politics is more difficult than physics. To create a global and shared value, we have to change our way of thinking. Problems cannot be solved with the same mindset that created them. So we have the same situation today." And finally, some important messages for Brazil. The bioeconomy has great opportunity for the Brazilian agriculture sector to use its full potential for producing food, fibers, energy, and the most important issue, new bioproducts. The Brazilian agrobusiness is growing fast, but has not yet been successful in generating corresponding socio-economic benefits by focusing on a few low-cost products such as sugar and soybeans to manufacture. Brazil has developed a complex agricultural research basis. However, investments in research and innovation, creating startups, for example, are still lacking. Agricultural inputs, fertilizers, and pesticides must be replaced as well by bio-based inputs. Brazil has been successful in the biofuel sector, but not in the use of biomass for the development of bioproducts such as bio-based chemicals, plastics, textiles, and furniture for application in several sectors. Production of biochemicals and bioplastics needs starch, sugar, and vegetable oil, and Brazil is main producer of maize, sugarcane, and soybean. You have plenty of raw materials for the production of chemicals and plastics. Brazil needs a bioeconomy strategy and action plan to add higher value added to the biomass, generate real socio-economic benefits, and increase exports to countries with strict regulations based on the circular economy. Exports to the European Union will be harder and harder due to stricter regulation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Pop, for your great lecture. I think there's a lot of information and things that we may discuss in here. We'll have an opportunity to do the questions at the end of our webinar. And
For sure.
thank you again. We'll go, okay. We'll go now to the Professor Miklos Fari presentation. Thank you, Professor. Professor Miklos is a professor at the Brasília University, and I've known some of his action in here, but be welcome, please, and let's go to lecture. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll try to present one well-done activities in Hungary as well in Europe in the area of biorefinery, especially in the area of green biorefinery. First question is, may I share my screen, or can I ask Edgar to present?
What do you prefer, Professor?
Oh, yes, I will try. I try to do. Okay. No,
Yes.
it's successful. Have you
Yes.
seen my first slide?
Professor, just go to the slide. We are seeing now the platform.
Yes, but I need my own, right? No, you can see?
Yes, perfectly.
Yes, this is my first slide. So what is the difference between the biorefinery and green biorefinery? The title of my presentation is Green Biorefinery as a Potential Key to Agriculture's European Green Deal. And I would like to make comments and information about the past, present, and future. This is the structure of my presentation. From the green biorefinery until the conclusion, I will try to show some European examples in this sector, as well as Hungarian initiatives. And also I would like to suggest a global cooperation both between Hungary and Brazil. What it means green biorefinery? This is a whole and very broad technological process, starting with green biomass, means green leaves and shoots, and all of the green biomass undergo to the wet fractionation, so-called wet fractionation, and can produce pressed cake as well pressed juice. This process involves some very important high-tech processing method, both from pressed cakes as well pressed juices, until to get pellets, solid fuel, biogas materials, as well as biofuels. So I need, sorry, my computer needs some energy. From pressed juice, we can produce proteins, lactic acid, biogas, feed, and different fermentation mediums. What generally means the green biorefinery as a high value added procedures. From the energy, heat, and fuels until the pharmaceutical and phytochemicals, this is a pyramid involving bioplastic, food, feed, and bulk of chemicals and materials. That is the basic thinking of the biorefineries process, and by economical side also. I can show some examples from European initiatives involving Holland, Denmark, as well Irish research activities, as well as investment in that side. First is coming from the Aarhus University, which is located in Denmark, when they developed an industrial type of demonstration plant from a green biorefinery, and they analyzed carefully the science behind this potential. In this figure, you can see some part of the demonstration plant. They use different kind of green biomass from grasses until the alfalfa and other leguminous crops, and the capacity of this process is 4-5 tons fresh tons per hour. What is the economical reason of these projects, which is called capex? The cost of the capex was 3.36 million euro. Depreciation time, according to the project leader, 15 years, involving 5% interest rate as well as 5% maintenance. Here they calculate the grass price as well fiber pulp price on the actual conditions, and then he can see the scenarios by organic process and the conventional procedures. Organic means different income, 4.70 million euro during 15 years of operation, and the conventional products get only a bit less, 3.25 million euro. Let's say the expenses, the grass, energy, salary, maintenance, depreciation, and interest. Altogether, the results presents that 0.66 million euro is the income, the results of the investment within 15 years. In the case of conventional production is not viable because the cost of the income is less, of course. That is the clear limitation actually. But please say this comment: residue juice is not given any cost or value. It is used for internal energy production at the biogas plant. That is the bottleneck of this process. What it means, they produce green press cake and use biogas station. And so-called brown juice, this is a vegetable hay, can also use as energy only. No any bioproducts or added value products coming out from this process, capex process. Let's see then another project, so Grassa. Grassa is Holland, coming from Netherlands. They have also a research network with different institutions as well as research station in Europe. They used only grasses. This figure shows why they choose the grasses for biorefining. Because in Holland, as well as in many European countries, the leaching of nitrogen is very extended. If we make this area of grasslands in Western Europe, you can see the green colors, and deep greens and blue means that they produce a lot of stable grasses due to the ecological situation. Let's say, for example, Holland, they have enough production capacity in grasses, but in Hungary, it's absolutely different. This yellow color shows that our grassland productivity is very limited in Central East Europe. Look. So that is clearly shows that within the green biomass approachment, there will be choose different technical as well as biological background, which needs extensive research activities. Look what they can produce from grasses. First is fiber and protein with optimal protein level for ruminants, dairy, cattle, and horses. Non-GMO digestible protein to replace GMO soy protein for poultry, pigs, and fish. The third group of products could be prebiotic fiber for digestive health in young animal and pets. And last but not least, the organic plant-based fertilizer production. These all are planned to make from grasses. This is very important and interesting conclusion of this grasses project. They mentioned that in the case of biorefining or grasses versus soy meal, they estimate less land use with 35%, less ammonia and phosphate emission by 30 and 50%. And last but not least, less GHG emissions with 75%. For Brazilian people, researcher, it is also very important message from the leaders of this Grassa project. No longer imports are required of 20 million tons soy protein in Europe, and no imports of minerals, I mean fertilizer. Biorefining 25 million hectare EU grassland, which is 35% of the total agriculture area, compensates for all soy import, non-GMO, payback time of investment. This is also very interesting, very enthusiastic idea. 3 years, depending on local conditions, at 8 tons per hour processing capacity. And last but not least, production of marginal land can substitute good agricultural land for protein production and no deforestation. And the third example is coming from Ireland. James Gaffey is the leader of this project and can see also the same optimistic scenario. They developed a so-called on-site processing green biorefining processes. This is the so-called big GB camion, and they process at the land side the green material and produce concentrated fibers as well as protein. According to this research team, they estimate that the nitrogen and phosphor release of the cattle feed can be diminished with 25%. And in the case of monogastric feed, the juice can be increased 40% of usable protein per hectare. This is the team of this Ireland and James Gaffey. And behind the people, you can see this very interesting innovation is a big camion-like GB procedure machine. And what is the Hungarian GB research initiative? So in that case, it would be very interesting to share information about our past and of course our present and perhaps our future. But perhaps no one knows in this channel that the first green biorefinery procedure was developed in Hungary and almost more than 100 years ago. The founding term of the biotechnology, Karl Ereky, started his work in Hungary exactly in 1917. And in the next decade, he's patented the first system in the name of green pulper and green mill. You can see here the so-called Ereky pulper and the last final products. He patented these procedures in 9 countries that time. And interestingly, during the Second World War, the Nobel candidate Norman Wingate Peary is accepted these procedures and offered to the UK government to make proteins and bioproducts during the isolating years when the U-boat blocked the ocean and the sea commerce. In Hungary, that also we continue these procedures in 1964, when the first industrial green biorefinery factory was established in the name of WebEx in 1974. And now I will try to show briefly some information about our newest Hungarian biorefinery process called ProteoMill. But before this, I can show you some historical figure. Very rarely can be seen what the Ereky process involved. This is the machine here, and the green mill was established here. You can see, as well as the structure of the building and the machinery and the amino acid content of the final products, and they used for feeding for animals as well as human being, not only in Hungary, but also in UK. Interestingly, I would like to show this original book, which was published, perhaps you can see here. This is the first biorefinery book published in 1924 in Hungarian language. It was to translate to English as well as Portuguese and other languages. This is so-called the gem of the Hungarian invention in that area. Very interesting book to see. We are lucky to get it. As well as I will also show another very interesting book. It's also published more than 100 years ago. This is a biotechnology. The same author is Karl Ereky, as well as Hungarian Károly Ereky or Carlos Ereky, Hungarian agriculture engineer. Continuing our presentation, so the project is involving altogether more than 40 researchers. The program started August 1st of 19 and forming 10 research groups. Here you can see some researchers who are involved into these protein projects. So we saw earlier these pyramids, and now at the left side you can see the technological tools as well as the products. The first is we established a green mill, or we can say again biorefinery which process 500 hectares of alfalfa, and the capacity of this factory is 20 tons of green fresh biomass of alfalfa per hour. The system is also involved industrial scale fermentation of plant juices, cultivation microalgae, bioreactor, and microalgae cultivation surface. And the products, technically real products, is biogas, second generation biofuel, biofertilizer, polylactic acid, so this is organic plastic, polyhydroxybutyrate, leaf protein concentrate, single cell protein, single cell oil, as well as fortified single cell protein and single cell oil. All sectors are involved into our research activity. The first research team is the central research team is a protein concentrate research team led by Eva Domokos-Szabolcsi. The research area is can be shown here. Production of LPC by macrocoagulation. I will turn back to this question, what it means. Studying the LPC structures, research on the so-called Erecki-Piri process, establishing Erecki-Piri process, the role of relationship between soil quality and protein production, water supply, and protein yield according to different varieties, the relationship between the quantity and the quality of protein, and obtention of research on functional single-cell protein, as I mentioned earlier. Here, this figure can show some part of the so-called development of novel LPC macrocoagulation process by microwave technology. The team works on protein, and this red circle shows the effect of microwave on the coagulation process. In the right side, you can see hypothetic structure of this combination of so-called non-protein nitrogen, cytosol lipids, membrane lipids, and different kind of protein, starting with Rubisco, cytosol protein, and chloroplast protein. The final products can be seen on this figure, and the liquid is a so-called brown juice, which is also very rich in bioactive compounds. Turn back to this figure, you can see we patented this process, and new industrial demonstration factory use these procedures in large scale. The team published very, very good accepted papers in high-ranking journals. So this is a wonderful opportunity and contribution to the so-called green biorefinery development. This is also very interesting, especially for a Brazilian point of view. Let's say the chemical construction of soybean and soybean green leaves and alfalfa green leaves. We can make comparison. The crude protein content of soybean is a full soybean, not only extracted soybean, full, has in Hungarian conditions 0.78 tons per hectare of crude protein. If we compare the soybean crude protein with the leaf crude protein content, you can see that the protein harvest can be double in comparison with the soybean crude protein. If we made a comparison with alfalfa green biomass, in alfalfa we can get until 4 tons per hectare of crude protein. If we also analyzing the extract with ether, as well as the final product of both the crude protein as well as ether extracts, also can be see the difference. In the case of soybean, the total bioactive compounds is 1.2 tons per hectare. In the case of green leaves, it's 2.10. If we compare the methionine and essential amino acid pattern bands, we can also make very significant increase of lysine and methionine content in comparison with the soybean seed. This is very important to pay attention in the future. When I will finish my lecture, a suggestion also being focusing on this aspect. The second research team is working on the brown juices. I presented earlier that in the protein extraction, we can receive at least 50% of brown juices, which is total plant juice out of protein. So, and in other terms, we can use the expression deproteinized plant juices. the team working on alfalfa brine juice as a raw material for bioindustry. The technology of juice fermentation of brown juice, how can we preserve brown juice as a plant nutrient sources or organic fertilizer, research on environmental parameters affecting vegetable hay, brown juices, deproteinous plant juices, and fatty acid composition. Nutrient replenishment research of horticulture and green surface plants with fermented green surface means green infrastructure in green cities with fermented brown juices. And also they work on research on heterotrophic and autotrophic microalgae cultivation as well as obtaining single cell oil. Here you can see the technical output of the research, lactic acid production, from which they can produce so-called polylactic acid, the plastic, bioplastic, and feed material and fermentation medium. And this research team also published good work, as well as they also presented a patent for the algae cultivation using brown juices, fermented brown juices. The third research team is a plant working on plant fibers. They researching the final product of the press cake from biofuel until fodder pellet. What they are doing, efficiency of wet fiber fraction production and decomposition by chemical way as well as different approachment to get second generation bioethanol. Effect of species and varieties on industrial processing of wet fractionation plant fibers. Research on alfalfa varieties with reduced lignin content is very important. Thinking on the methane emission. Production of artificial manure, production of biogas and biochar. The fourth research team is a sea and carbon and nitrogen cycle research team, led by Sylvia Veres. The team is focusing on nutrient replenishment research of alfalfa and field plants in hydroponic system with brown juice and fermented brown juice products. The second research area is effect of temperature and other environmental factors on dry matter production of alfalfa cultivars. Exploration of the physiological consequences of induced stress in the context of carbon and nitrogen cycle, description of species reactions, and last but not least, the greenhouse gas emission balance and alfalfa carbon and nitrogen cycle. The team also presented nice papers and has a very excellent research capacity for any kind of bilateral cooperation. What the global cooperation needed, why? I try to focusing on three main points in the cooperation area. The green biorefinery sector has great opportunity for both Hungarian and Brazilian agriculture to use its full potential for producing novel bio-based products. Interestingly, I tried to get information from Portuguese language as English, this green biorefinery sector in Brazil. However, very limited publication coming out from both language. So therefore, I believe that within the biorefinery national plan, the green biorefinery sector is very weak in Brazil, in my opinion. Therefore, Hungary and Brazil needs a competitive green biorefinery strategy and action plan to add higher value to the green biomass, generate real ecological and socio-economic benefits, and increase export to countries with strict regulations based on the circular economy. Here I can cite Professor Pop, who mentioned almost the same suggestion for us. And last but not least, in this complex approachment, the University of Debrecen and some other Hungarian research and development institutions have great potential for R&D cooperation with Brazilian universities and institutions in the green biorefinery sector. And finally, I would like to show the last message, not from myself, but the founding father of term biotechnology and the founder of the very first green biorefining concept and technology, Karl Erecki. Karl Erecki wrote in 1937, more than 80 years ago, there is a world shortage of protein, and the demand for protein feed is so high that all states allow it duty-free, and there is no quantity that cannot be disposed of in good quality protein feed. And thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, Professor Fari, thank you for all this information and very interesting presentation. Now we have the presentation of Mrs. Julia Morvan that will talk to us about some opportunities and opinion on the perspectives of the relationship, research relationships and others between Brazil and Hungary. Thank you.
That's right. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, Julia, we can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you. I will just share my screen with you. Just a moment. There you go. I hope you can see my presentation.
Yes, we can see.
Perfect. Okay. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today and to organize this fantastic event. I don't know if you know, but Hungary is the month for Hungarian science. So I'm very happy that today 3 professionals from the field of agriculture could share their research fields and all the relevant information that you might find useful in this field. I'm very happy that we could join today, and despite the big distance between our countries, we could bring a piece of Hungary to Brazil today. I am Science and Technology Attaché in the Consulate General of Hungary in São Paulo. This is a brand new position, just started in January, and it also shows the intention of the Hungarian government to strengthen the relations in the field of science and technology with Brazil. This position also shows that we consider Brazil as a strategic partner in the field of science and including agriculture, of course. So far, not much has been said about Hungary in general, so I just listed here for you some pictures to have a glimpse of our beautiful country and our capital in the heart of Europe, as you can see on the map. Here's some quick facts about Hungary. At the moment, the government spends Hungary in general spends 1.8% of the GDP on research and development. Just for you to have an idea, this number in the European Union is 3% now, and our goal is to get to 3% by 2030 in Hungary. We have around 1,600 startups. Most of these startups work in the field of agriculture, health, fintech, and software development. But you can see that agriculture is also a very important field among startups. And we have 64 universities. Around 30 of these offers programs in English. So there is a big potential to build cooperation with Hungarian universities. I listed here some of the latest high-level meetings between Brazil and Hungary. In 2019, the president of Embrapa visited Hungary. It was a water summit, and he has been contributing to a panel about how to resolve water crisis. And in 2020, we had a visit of Teresa Cristina, minister to Hungary, and the Minister of Agriculture, István Nagy, to Brazil. They had several meetings in both countries, and the Hungarian minister visited Embrapa and had a very respectful meeting in the genetic bank of Embrapa. And during this period, they signed also a contract a memorandum of understanding in the field of agriculture between EMBRAPA and that time the Hungarian Agricultural Innovation Institution, which is now called MATE. It became a university for agriculture and life sciences. So you can see that even on the highest level and even in the field of memorandum of understandings, we have a nice framework to put forward the cooperation between our countries. I also brought some examples of the latest cooperation fields between our countries. Just at this week happening Planet Budapest Sustainability Expo and Summit in Budapest, and we have a nice Brazilian delegation participating, including the president of FAPESP, the director-president of the Companhia Ambiental do Estado de São Paulo, and also the representative of EMBRAPA, Vinícius Pereira Guimarães, who is the coordinator of the European office of EMBRAPA, LABEX Europa. Another great news, I think, for both of our countries is that there is a Hungarian company called Dr. Bata. It's a biotechnological company which will create a research laboratory in the field of biotechnology at the Universidade do Estado de Santa Catarina. And this will count with the investment of the Hungarian government, 32 million Brazilian reais. So this will also give an impulse for common projects and research in the field of biotechnology. Here I brought some information about government strategies and Hungary's priorities in the field of agriculture. In 2019, we created our digital agricultural strategy, which is focusing on digital competencies, developing different databases, the e-commerce, and a crop estimation based on remote sensing. The strategy is now in the field of in the phase of revision, and we also ask the cooperation of our Brazilian partners to provide some examples from Brazil that we could use when developing the strategy. In this year, we also created a coalition, the Hungarian Drone Coalition, which will focus on the development of the strategy on the implementation, fabrication, and research of drones. And some of our priorities, of course, match the ones told already by the professors previously. It's circular economy, green energy, energy security, climate and environmental protection, food safety. As you know, Hungary is GMO-free, precision farming and use of 5G in the agricultural sector, which is also a very hot topic here in Brazil, the use of management control applications, product tracking systems, and online business development. As for cooperation possibilities, well, you've heard so much from my colleagues before, but I will just give some extra information just to inspire you on which fields you might cooperate with Hungarian partners, apart from the ones already told. There is a program called Panom Breeding Program. It's from the Hungarian University of Agriculture and Life Sciences, MATE, that I mentioned before. This program will last 4 years with the inclusion of 160 researchers who will work on 24 research topics, mainly studying the plant gene pool of the region. But they say that these researches can be adapted also in South America and the Brazilian region. Their goals are greenhouse farming, genetic research of crops, phytoremediation research, energy plants, remediation of soil, risk analysis of pest management. For example, I included in my presentation some links that are clickable, so if you receive the presentation, you can read more about these projects. In the next slides, I highlighted some strengths of Hungary that I would like to talk about. One is agriculture and fisheries, for example, breeding programs for aquaculture species, a genetic conservation program for endangered species, gene banking, technical development in hydrobiological investigation and nutrition cycle of combined intensive extensive aquaculture systems, nutritional and immunological research, improvement of fish feeds. In the field of agricultural water management, geography information system-based mapping of excess water hazard, excess water management, remote sensing techniques, energy and water saving irrigation techniques, wastewater usage for irrigation and energy plantations, and research on stress tolerance of rice, for example. You can read all these slides later on in details. Further potential cooperation possibilities are in the field of viniculture, viticulture. You might know that Hungary is famous, at least in Europe, for its wine regions. We have ongoing cooperation in the field of development of in vitro embryo producing systems and drone technologies. And a very prospectful news is most probably Hungary and Brazil will set up a common research, development, and innovation fund funded by the two countries, which will help to fund projects from both countries with the involvement of research institutions, universities, and companies. This project is under development at the moment, but we believe that maybe from next year, the first call for application can be published, and the project proposals could be sent for consideration for both parties. Other thing that we could consider for the future is some matchmaking events in the different fields of agriculture. For example, to give a start to cooperation in the Horizon Europe program. Another important topic is in the field of education, which I believe is important both for students and professors. You might know that since 2013, the Hungarian government offers a scholarship for Brazilian students each year with a quota of 250 places. This scholarship funds tuition fee, health insurance, gives aid for accommodation, and a monthly stipend in general in full degree programs and partial studies. And one of the priority programs of this scholarship is agriculture. So I strongly encourage all your colleagues and students to take a look at the website of the program and see whether you find the potential in it. The application is actually open since November and it goes until the middle of January. So still there is some time to map the possibilities and choose the universities that might be of your interest. And to close my presentation, I would like to just quickly list some of the actors of the agricultural sector that you might find interesting and which you should think about when you think about broadening the number of your partners in Europe and in Hungary. One of them is, two of them is two national laboratories. These laboratories are attached to universities in Hungary. One tackles climate change. It's a multidisciplinary laboratory. The other is focused on agricultural technology, and they expressed interest with Brazil in the field of soil information databases. The other three institutions belong to the Ötvös-Loránd Research Network. These centers are the Ecological Research Center, which focuses on ecological and evolutionary biology research and the effect of agriculture and forestry and biodiversity. You can see here the research institutions down there. There is the Balaton Limnological Research Institute, which studies freshwater ecosystems and conservation of biodiversity. And the third one is the Center for Agricultural Research, which mainly focuses on the basic and applied research and development in the field of agriculture and environmental sciences. And the last entity that I would like to highlight is Bajzoltán, nonprofit company for applied research. They have special interest in working together in Brazil in the cooperation of bioremediation. They have a project on environmental protection in the field of microbiology, and they are a company that has a network all over Hungary. They have many research units focused on applied research. They are very competent and professional, and I suggest getting in touch with them if you are thinking about these fields. Well, basically, that was all that I wanted to say. Just a quick introduction to the relations between Brazil and Hungary, mainly in the field of agriculture. If you have any further questions, please visit our website or Facebook or get in touch with me through email. I thank you for the possibility.
Okay, thanks, Julia, for all your information that you brought us. And now we'll have a moment. We'll see the questions that were sent by the chat. And let's see, just give us a minute and we'll organize these questions and bring to you. Thank you. I'd like to invite all the speakers again to compose this this sheet. Well, thank you. Thank you all. We'll have some questions here from Professor Hau. Is that right? What are the Hungarian priorities in its interactions with Visosa? This considering the Hungarian as represented by the consulate attaché, Ms. Julia Morvan, the Hungarian institutions here represented. Yes, they are. How are the Hungarian institutions here represented? How best to move forward?
Thank you for the question. I think the best way to move forward is to move forward with the professors who are here with us today, because we already have with them the specific areas which are of mutual interest. So this is the step 0, I think, or the step first. With the rest of the institutions, what we could do is, from my side, I presented many areas of potential cooperation from our side. If you see something after I sent you my presentation and you read in details the information, if you find common points, I would be very happy to put you in contact with these institutions, find the right representatives, and start out with a webinar, or not even a webinar, just an online meeting, maybe half an hour, just to introduce your field, the Hungarians introduce their fields, and you try to identify the common focus points which could give start to a future cooperation. Hope I answered the question.
Okay. In your opinion, how can we enhance or promote Brazil fitness and Brazilian researchers' concrete actions to contribute to this circular economy context and goals? Professor. Anyone, I think you may answer. It's a general question. Hungary, Brazil, aiming or not, the circular economy goes. Well, that was my question. Just I wrote it down. The idea is we face here in Brazil some challenges to get funds, and we're just focused on other research goals, but this is a trend, this circular economy, low emission carbon, and how do you think we may enhance Brazilian researchers to join these goals?
Let me give you some contribution to this question. Hungary started to elaborate on the circular economy strategy with the help of the OECD. I am included in this process as well, and hopefully by the end of next year, even Hungary will have a circular economy strategy. But about the bioeconomy strategy, we have no idea yet. We should start to elaborate on the strategy, but in 4 months we have the next election, and that's much more important than a bioeconomy strategy. We are about 10 years behind the old member states like Germany, France, and Italy, 10 years behind. And we will lose GDP growth in the future for sure. The question, how many percentage points? Because we will not produce all the products, including fossil carbon today, have to be replaced by products including biocarbon or renewable carbon. And we have to import these products, and other member states or other countries in the world will have a larger GDP from the production of these sustainable products. I am not talking about just energy. Energy is one issue. I am talking about end products. Each product, including plastic, must be replaced. That's just an example. Chemicals, pesticides, synthetic pesticides, fertilizer must be replaced. And it's described in details in the European Green Deal. We know what to do, but we do not do it. I know that you are very close to a bioeconomy strategy. I mean, Brazil is very close to that, but you have to go into details. Very soon to have a strategy in a year or 2 years, because you will have a very good export markets in the EU with bioproducts like biochemicals, bioplastics, biopharmaceuticals, etc. You need starch, vegetable oil, and sugar, as I mentioned, for the production of most of the bioproducts. You have it. We have just maize, starch, for example, just for the introduction of the discussion.
Okay, Professor Miklos?
Yes, turning back to the previous question about which area could be interesting for both partners, both countries. In that respect, I can say the green biorefinery research and development could be a good candidate, because the process is so complex and needs research activities, and the so-called technology readiness level in Hungary is near the 7 in different area. And together we can develop more until number 9 of TNL. Together, we can be established a firm scientific and technology basis of green biorefinery. For that reason, I presented a lecture, a slide about the soybean. The green soybean leaves are producing much more protein than seeds, as example. But we analyzed only that so-called seed type of soybean. But traditionally, soybean is not seed plant. It's a green forage. Until the end of the 30s of last century, they was only produced for green fodder. And if together with breeders and institutions, we can turn back to as an example of soybean. I believe the future is so prospectful, and in bilateral cooperation, we can open a very promising future. So that is why I choose a presentation, the green biorefinery, as a focusing point of eventual bilateral cooperation. So you can share my lecture with other professors, and you personally, Edgar, visited us 2 years ago, and you picked up a lot of information about our activities and competitive level. So that's why I can give some information about it. So that is briefly my idea. This is my personal idea. Perhaps Dr. Pop also can support it, this idea. Knows much more better in the economical side.
Yes, sure that cooperation between both sides would be beneficial for us. The major problem in the new member states, like in Hungary, is that as long as we have no bioeconomy strategy, we will not have a research fund for the research of bioeconomy. That's the major issue. Otherwise, we could start easily to find a research fund in Hungary. But just Latvia introduced a bioeconomy strategy out of the 13 new member states. I think the only way today is we have to look at EU funds. First, we need a strategy. After that, we have research funds. After that, we can get a cooperation much more easier than right now. Because we do not have access to research fund in Hungary.
So do you also see a possible
Just in Brussels, yes.
No, like a multilateral cooperation could also be a form of going forward, right?
Yes.
Regarding that, I guess a number of these European calls, they are actually multilateral, and we do have some ongoing initiatives, particularly with Germany, focusing on biomass energy production towards biorefinery, and one of them is the Macauba one, which was just selected a bilateral project, and we are in together with Hohenheim. So thinking about these possibilities will likely help direct the effort and match both sides, allowing Hungary get into the system with us. We actually do need that in order to try to tap the possibilities within the either European community or OECD or whatever comes about. But they are good suggestions, and the presentations were helpful on that. Of course, our groups are a bit fragmented since they explore different resources or sources of energy. That will require a bit of matching to select the best options to deal with. But it's something to think about and prospect. And I appreciate the opportunity. I also enjoy quite a bit the list of priorities, research institutions, and funding provided by the consulate representative as well. That it's helpful to anchor and root the effort on our end.
OECD could be a good link. That's true, because if they pick a topic and bioeconomy is important, And you have a say at OECD as well, I mean Brazil. If they pick a topic, they put fund on it. I know that. It could be, including several OECD countries.
Okay, thank you. It was a satisfaction to be there in Hungary 2 years ago. Yes, and there is I was surprised with so much information and things that you have there, including this biorefinery project that you presented me there, and I thank you for that. What I was just trying to send you and to the participants here. I have just seen there is a call from the Hungarian. This one. We have grants for undergraduate and graduate students in Hungary that may help us to have some funds and start this conversation about some of these topics. We have also some interests in common that we are just pursuing them about this biorefinery with the use of some grasses, and we're trying. I think we have some problems with this pandemic that just have us delayed with the schedule of your visit here, and it will be very interesting for the occasion of your visit here that we have some meetings with the professor. But with this webinar, I think we have the opportunity to start and spread this information, and we start to look for these specific goals and common goals that here in Brazil, considering Universidade Federal de Viçosa or other universities in here, that we may join and think about common objectives and common projects that we may seek for funding, grants, and other interactions, even in other areas, just like some of you have told us before. We have a lot of opportunity in here because Brazil, we have space, we have land, we have water, we have opportunities, but sometimes I think we have just to be open to these new opportunities and seeking them. We have new alliance, new partnerships in research, and where we all will be granted with these advances that we may have with these opportunities. That's it.
I think you mentioned the stipendium program for graduate, undergraduate students, yes?
Yes, I have just...
the stipendium, you mean the stipendium.
Yes,
okay, but just one remark, as a head of more doctorate course, I have known stipendium program for 10 years. And we recognized that the government of Brazil is not very much supportive for the area agriculture in the stipendium program. Other areas are much more supported than agriculture. So we have students from Brazil, but not in the area of agriculture. That's my point.
Okay.
And that decision is made by the Brazilian government, not by the Hungarian government. What we do, the doctorate course, that we have the applications, and we can give from 0 to 100 points for each application. And if an application reach over 60 points, then that application could be received by a doctorate school. But the final decision is made by the Brazilian government. Let's say we have 400 applications, okay, for the doctorate course in Hungary, and your government will tell us that this 2026 people will go to Hungary. And agriculture is generally excluded from these areas. That's just a remark. from my side. But I think Professor Fari has similar experiences because he traveled to Brazil to have more Brazil students in the area of agriculture in the stipendium program. Professor Fari.
So my opinion is absolutely similar as Professor Pop mentioned. So we tried many times to invite researchers as well as students. I personally visited Brazil with 15 students to make around in Brazilian universities, and we presented our possibilities and our capacity as well. And the final results is very, very moderate. That was really my observation. I entirely agree with Professor Pop. So we should find some way out from this bottleneck together with the consulate. Perhaps we can present the problem to the authorities of the Brazilian government. Perhaps this webinar also facilitate and accelerate the positive outlook.
If I may, one possibility that we can try work it out together is that indeed, especially the last few years, agriculture is not really a priority in scholarship.
Yes, that's my point. That's my point.
Yeah, and well, especially in the last 2 days, health it's the priority nationwide and even within the state. Mining and mine-related issues are being set as priority. But there are byways to deal with that. One thing to consider is that since we have a fair amount of top-ranked programs, graduate programs in Brazil, they do have scholarship or stipend quotas, which include 1 year away. So we can actually, if you manage to recruit or prospect the involvement of this 11 programs or roughly about that, we can actually try to establish some sort of channel with particular partners in Hungary and use the programs to bridge, at least in initial stage, such relationship. They will pretty much be based on student flow and faculty flow. The program was a bit slow in the last 2 years because of the pandemics, but it's restarting. And from March on, the expectations that we'll have or approach a regular flow of students and faculty. So it's more of a question of really recruiting and identifying the priorities and establish this either joint or bilateral programs, because they will be the spark that will actually allow the student to come up with the interest and go for. In that sense, of course, the seminar is the important first step, but yeah, further exposure via other seminars, eventual visits will be important to complement the initiative. So hopefully from January 1, we'll be able to work a bit more on that.
I think that Brazil must be included in the Erasmus and Erasmus Plus program. For example, that's an opportunity to exchange professors, lecturers, students, etc. It's a good opportunity. It can be done easily because it's just an agreement between two universities. I have done it with a lot of universities. I have visited a lot of universities in this framework. Maybe we could start with an Erasmus or Erasmus Plus program.
Good.
That's the easiest and fastest way to start the cooperation.
No, it's a good suggestion, and I've seen some of the calls that via Euro Access, and the Jen Monet actually provided presentation here the early in this year, And that is a second channel to explore. It goes from faculty mobility, student mobility, even involving possibilities later on of joint master's degree. So
Yeah, yes.
we're open to all of them. It's just
Okay.
really a question of identifying the key points of interest and going forward. And we'll be helping on this way, sure.
Thank you.
So you have mentioned an interesting thing about the economy of the significant, how significant is our suggestion for the Brazilian economy. So when I know well, the maize production in Brazil is about 110 million tons. For soybean, it is about 125 million tons for this year. So they are huge amounts. And it is not indifferent whether this crop is healthy, for food safety is okay. Otherwise, it cannot be exported, for example, to Europe, because in Europe, in this respect, the toxin standards are rather rigorous.
Yes.
So, and my suggestion was, in a sense, to evaluate this variety screening system for the small grain cereals and maize, that by this way that you produce more healthy crop, the Brazilian export can be increased significantly without produce more, because you will less losses due to, for example, toxin contamination. And this can be a rather high amount of money, because in the article we have written with Professor Pop last March, we have counted out that about 10% of the crop is jeopardized by mycotoxins globally each year. So it doesn't mean that every year you have to suffer, for example, 10 million tons in Brazil or 12 million tons for soybean and 10 million for maize. It is not a rule, but can be that you have double problem, and you might have years where the losses are much less. But earlier or later, the losses will come, and it is much more cheaper to prevent this, as give them thereafter toxin binder and very expensive cleaning and so on and so on and so on. So it is better to produce a crop which can be sold without any toxicological problem from the field directly, without any other additional costs and problems. So that would be a good thing, I think, for Brazil. We are working also, we have now discussions with the government to introduce this system in Hungary. It seems that we are in agreement that it is necessary, and we are looking now for money. So, and the financing is everywhere a problem, but we hope when we can make a good cooperation in Brazil, and in Hungary we can make in Brazil several important development work to, for example, somebody can come to my lab to have a PhD, or can come to the Szeged University and he can or she can write his thesis or her thesis in my lab. It is possible. But until now, there was not this stipendium system that Professor Pop mentioned is very important, because there were also several people who wanted to come to my lab, but it was not possible because I did not have money to pay them, and there was not a stipendium who could pay for that. Thank you.
We don't have applicants right now from Brazil. That's the major issue. We have the money, stipendium. We don't have applicants.
But when we have spoken now, maybe this situation may change in Brazil.
It's worth in changing, and I do believe that we have good grounds from that. As long as the connection or the interaction started, it's likely to be able to establish a flow. The quick is out. They started a bit slow, but yeah, working through the programs, we even have this flexibility regarding scholarships at an initial stage, and we should be able to build up from that, I hope.
I have just one consideration. From my experience, I'm just starting now, but I've seen some initiatives with Neumann institution. It's a German institution with coffee culture that they are aiming to they are aiming at researchers for low carbon emissions. We have some interests with I think with Ili Cafe that aim these goals of low emission carbon cultures, and I think with some it's not official, but some conversations with other professors, and even the opportunity to talk with agencies. Sorry, like FAPEMIG here, and if we can seek. If we can meet with professors not only from Viçosa but from modern universities, and look for this federal and state government context that to enhance or to seek for these specific interests, and that we can show them that they will be beneficial and will have, if we grow together, if we stay together, we can look for these funds and make this collaborative research. I think it's a beginning, and I think it's an opportunity. And every effort and every contact that we have in government, in this research funding agencies here in Brazil, we may have something more than this medium seek for the programs like Professor Fadi said. I think we may increase it, but we're starting. I think it's a good opportunity for that. Okay.
If you refer to low carbon economy, that's bioeconomy. Yes, bioeconomy is the final is the final step. We refer all the time to low carbon economy. It's called bioeconomy in Europe. To replace fossil carbon with biocarbon, we are talking about that, or renewable carbon, as I mentioned.
Just a quick comment, sorry, because I felt myself addressed with the Stipendium Hungaricum program. So the consulate is in touch with the Brazilian coordinative body, which is called CAPES. It belongs to the Brazilian Ministry of Education. And I can raise the topic of how we could increase the number of doctorate students in the field of agriculture in the program. And maybe in the future, we could organize a separate meeting like introducing the programs of finances, like Erasmus program, Stipendium Hungaricum program in details, and the Brazilian programs that the professor mentioned before, like it would be another event with another focus, targeting the students and the professors or the staff members that would be interesting. I think it's also a way to go on.
Sounds a good plan.
Okay. Does anyone
From our side, we can help the applicants to give a good university, a good faculty, and a possible supervisor of the student. We can do that. We can do that.
The most important.
Even ourselves. A supervisor.
Good to know.
Yes.
Okay, that's right.
And even your university could channel some students into this pathway.
We'll try to do that, and we'll try to get involved with
Yes,
you
you have
all
to
in
collaborate with
individual
Julia.
meetings.
She can check it.
Okay, then, does anyone have any more comments? Okay, then, we had a lot of compliments and congratulations to the speakers. I thank you all for your contribution. As I said before, I think this is the first step, and I'm a believer, and I believe that we'll have more contributions from now on, and we'll seek for that with further contacts here in Viçosa and other universities, and even the private initiative, seeking for these goals that are aligned with the options that you mentioned to us. And I thank you all, and I let you the word if you want to say something more. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
See you
It was a
again.
Have a
pleasure.
nice day.
Thank you.
Hope to see you again
Goodbye.
soon. Bye.
Parabéns, muito obrigado, Edgar.
Obrigado, professor.
Obrigado a vocês.
Uma satisfação.
Parabéns para
Tchau,
todos.
tchau.
Obrigado.
Julia.